Hello again, Biology 202 students. Welcome to your Hybrid Lab screencast lectures. My name is Jeff Mylander, and I will be your online instructor this semester. This lecture will be focused on the syllabus, how the course is set up, how you will be evaluated, and what to expect for the first week of lab. Let's begin by taking out your syllabus if you haven't already done so. Here's that orange statement. Remember, pause the video if you need to get your copy. If you are watching this lecture, then you are most likely in a hybrid version of the 202 lab, but you may have missed the first lab and you're using this lecture to get caught up. What does a hybrid lab mean? Well, you may have heard the term flipped classroom before, and these labs are essentially the same idea. You are required to watch these screencast lectures before coming to lab each week, and you will be required to take at least 2 pages of notes in your notebooks. I'll tell you more about this a little bit later. It may seem overwhelming at first, but I assure you it will allow for more convenience in your education. You can watch the lecture when your ability to pay attention is at its peak, and you have the freedom to watch the lectures in smaller chunks of time. Or you can pause the video and review complicated or confusing portions of the lectures. Then, when you show up for lab, you will have a test over the previous week's information. Your lab TA will conduct a short review over the material you watched at home for the current lab, and you will spend most of your time in lab doing hands-on activities, things like looking at models, viewing slides, or conducting various activities and dissections. Some of you may even have me as your lab instructor, but it is best to check your BB-Learn shells and your LUI account to verify who your lab TA actually is. Be sure to get your TA's email or best method of contact, office hours, and find out what the open lab schedule is. This should be posted on BB-Learn, but it is always posted outside of the actual lab room, Biology 124. On a side note, we are always updating our videos and PowerPoints to bring you the most up-to-date information as possible. Sometimes we miss various edits, and you might find some minor inconsistencies between the PowerPoints on BB-Learn and the videos you watch for lecture. Always be sure to communicate any differences with your lab TA so we can make necessary edits. Thanks for your help. Now, you've probably already received an email from your TA about required and recommended materials, but here it is again. Make sure you purchase the lab manual and a bound composition notebook. Blank is preferred, but grid-lined will work too. We suggest that you pick up the recommended DVD because it has all the images of the slides that you will see in lab, and it makes a great resource for studying at home. That being said, some students like taking photos through the microscopes or using the internet. Below that information, you can see a shortened version of what was included in the How to Be Successful document that we already went over in the previous lecture. The next topic we will look at is the schedule. You will see there are 4 columns. The first shows you the dates that correlate to each Monday of every week, so be sure you look up what day and time your specific lab takes place. The second column shows you the lab number. The third column shows you what subject we will be going over each week, or if there is no lab, and the last column shows you what is due each week. It's important to note that you have an online histology test due before your first week of lab. You will find that test on your BB-Learn shell and the accompanying tissue histology review PowerPoint for you to use to prepare for that test. Here's that colored statement again. We recommend pausing the video here and transferring all of these due dates directly into your planner. You are responsible for all due dates and assignments. You should also start planning study times throughout the week, when you will watch this online lecture, make flashcards, finish your notebooks, etc. If you haven't already, watch the How to Be Successful screencast and see the weekly lab study schedule example. Plan to build in 4 to 7 hours of study time into your schedule each week. I would recommend doing this for all other classes you're taking to help you stay on track as well. All right, now that you have set aside time for studying and know when all your due dates are, you are less likely to forget these tasks and are more likely to perform better. It is important to understand that here at NAU, Biology 202 Lab is a co-requisite with the lecture. That means that if you are not performing well in one and you decide to drop it, you will have to drop the other as well. Your academic advisor can provide more information for you if you find yourself in this position. Below this section is the contact information for Dr. Emma Beninati, Lab Manager, and myself, Jeff Mylander, Lab Supervisor. If you should find that you have any issues that you cannot speak with your lab TA about, please contact either of us. That being said, you should follow the appropriate protocol listed below. Please discuss the issue with your lab TA first. They are here to help and listen regardless of the issue. If you cannot resolve the issue with the TA, please contact one of us. We will then meet to discuss the situation with both the TA and the student on separate occasions and come to a resolution. This slide should be pretty self-explanatory, but your attendance is mandatory to all labs. We meet once a week to cover a large amount of material, so missing a lab can really affect your performance. We do not allow late work or offer makeup labs unless you have a university excused absence, for example, a sporting event, club, or military event. If you oversleep, are sick, or get a ticket because you're speeding to get to lab on time, you will not be able to make up the lab activity, test, or turn in your work. Fortunately for you, if this does happen, you can unofficially make up the lab by using BB Learn to watch our online lectures, review the PowerPoints, follow along with your syllabus, and view specimens in open labs. In order to do well, you must watch these videos before coming to lab, and you should spend a lot of time practicing. You are learning a new language and a new way to view the body, so you will need to review the material each week. And finally, we do not offer extra credit at any point throughout the semester except for on the final practical. Take your time working on the review exercises, make really good notebooks, and set aside the time to really learn this material. That way you won't need any extra credit at the end of the semester. As I mentioned earlier, you will have weekly tests at the beginning of each lab. This test will be worth 20 points. For hybrid version classes, your tests will consist of 17 points from the previous week's material in the form of short answer and practical questions. And you will have 3 points from broad-based general questions from the screencast for that current lab. To clarify, Test 1 will have 17 points covering the endocrine system, tissues, and the syllabus, and 3 points from Lab 2, the blood lab. Example questions you might see on the test from the current lab would be name 2 types of formed elements, or what type of tissue is blood classified as. There will not be practical-based questions for these 3 points. If you have listened carefully to the screencast and taken 2 pages of notes, you should be able to answer these questions without any issues. Your lowest test will be dropped at the end of the semester. You can use this as your one get-out-of-jail-free card in an emergency or if something comes up. We don't give makeup tests unless you have a university excused absence. And as you can see in this example, spelling counts. If you misspell a word, even by a letter or 2, you may be speaking about a totally different structure. And yes, there are 2 L's in spelling. Everyone has the opportunity to earn 20 professional points. Once we finish going over the syllabus, you will read over your syllabus contract, which is posted on BB Learn, and sign it. You will turn this in the first lab and earn your first 5 points, starting the semester with an A. The other 15 professional points are earned for showing up on time, staying the entire lab, cleaning up your lab stations, and respecting peers, TAs, and undergraduate lab assistants. I mentioned review exercises before, but to reiterate, you are completing the ones we have posted on BB Learn, not the ones at the end of each chapter in your lab manual. You can do those ones for practice later. I recommend that you print these out before each lab and bring them with you. If you get done with the lab activities early, you may want to work on them in lab. You will turn them in at the beginning of each lab, so when you show up to Lab 2, you will be turning in the review exercises for Lab 1. As you can see on the syllabus, the hybrid version lab TAs will only grade 5 of these at random, and the others will be recorded as a professional point for turning it in. They are not meant to be busy work. Rather, they are intended to be used as active learning tools, so use these as practice and study guides. If you do work with a lab mate on these, be sure that they are written in your own words. Otherwise, it will be considered plagiarism. One of your required materials is a composition notebook. We grade these 2 times during the semester, once at midterms and once at the end of the semester. The hybrid version notebooks are worth 5 more points each time we grade them. Remember your 2 pages of notes over the lectures? Those count as 1 point for each lab. That means at the end of the semester, the hybrid version lab notebooks are worth 10 points more than the in-person labs, which is why we grade 1 extra review exercise in the in-person labs. It accounts for the extra 10 points. Finally, we do have a cumulative final practical worth 50 points. Your lab TA will go over the details of this test as we get closer, but you should continually study throughout the semester to keep these topics fresh in your mind. With all of these assignments, your total grade in this lab will be out of 370 points. Please visit BB Learn often to keep track of your grade and see your TA if your grade starts to fall. Okay, on to the lab notebook. For this section, you will need to take out your notebook checklist and follow along. Now that you have your notebook checklist, we can get started. You will need a blank composition notebook like the ones you see in the bottom left corner. Blank is preferred because your drawings will be easier to study from and your labels won't get obscured by lines, but a grid-lined one is okay too. You will need to purchase this before your first lab, and you can order them online if all the stores in Flagstaff run out, which is normally what happens. Biology requires that we as scientists take detailed notes, make detailed drawings, and ensure that our work is transparent and reproducible. Therefore, these notebooks are designed to prepare you to become a better scientist. Research also tells us that drawing structures and specimens helps store that information into long-term memory, develops our spatial recognition skills, and improves our recall of the material on tests. This notebook takes work and time, but if approached as an active learning tool, they should help you earn higher scores on tests. I'm going to run you through the basics of setting up your notebooks, and your specific lab TA can answer other questions you may have. All the instructions you need to be successful are in the notebook checklist, so be sure to read them carefully. Like any good book, one of the first things you need to have is a table of contents. When you open the cover, the first page should be your table of contents. At the top, write Table of Contents. Then make 3 columns titled Lab Number, Lab Name, and Page Number. You can see what a table of contents should look like in this example. Go ahead and pause the video here and set up your table of contents now. Earlier, I mentioned you would be taking at least 2 pages of notes for each screencast. Skip 1 page after your table of contents and write the number and title of the lab at the top of the page like you see in this example. You only need to do this on the first page of each week's lab. After the title is written, you will need room to take at least 2 pages of notes. You are welcome to take more, but it's up to you. To the right on this slide, you can see I have my notes set up, and I have used underlining, indentation, different colors, and numbers to make various pieces of information stand out. Again, this is a study technique to help you remember which page certain information is on, or to easily skim your notes to find a word or concept. The notes you take are expected to be of high quality and completely fill the page. You will not earn full credit by writing really big or spreading out each line of text. After your 2 pages of notes is where you will be setting up the rest of the information you will need for labs. Here you can see that I have images from Lab 1 tissues. Make your drawings in pencil so when you make a mistake you can erase. You will lose points for scratching out drawings or drawing arrows, insinuating that you made your drawings in the wrong spot. If you are looking through a microscope, place your drawings in a circle to represent the field of view and draw them to scale. Be sure you draw on cells and fibers to illustrate layers or structures. You can trace your images, and some students have even used their phones and tablets to trace over top of. You don't lose points for not being a good artist, but you will need to spend time making a representative drawing. If we can't tell what it is, and it just looks like a bunch of squiggles, you will lose points. Last, you cannot cut and paste out images from the internet or lab manual, and if you are repeating this lab, you will have to redo the lab notebook. You cannot reuse your past notebooks. Include the lab title at the top with the name and the date of the lab that you're working on. The checklist shows you what drawings you need to make and any structures that need to be labeled. Be sure to clearly label and make sure the line touches the structure that you are labeling and not the empty space around it. All of the TAs and TAAs are more than happy to check over your notebooks throughout the semester to be sure you are making precise drawings and labels, so ask them to look it over each week. Any histology drawings must have a magnification and need to be drawn by looking through the microscopes, not the internet or lab manual. You can reference those resources while studying, but use your time in lab to view the slides we have out for you because these are the slides we will test you on each week. We advise that you look at each specimen under low, medium, and high powers to get an understanding of the specimen. You never know what magnification your lab TA will set the microscope to on a test. This also develops a spatial relationship with that specimen and can provide helpful information when taking your tests. In this lab, you will never use the oil immersion lens, so you will never label a drawing 1000x. Colored pencils are a great way to make structures stand out on paper and in your mind, but they are not mandatory. We do have class sets for you to use while in lab. We know these notebooks can be overwhelming at first, but we expect you to take them seriously because in the end they are worth the equivalent of 3 tests. They are great study tools and can be a helpful reference as you move on in your academic careers. Here are some examples from past students, and it should be obvious why these students got full credit. Not because they are good artists, but because they took their time and really observed the specimens and models. Their labels are neat and accurate, and they have the appropriate magnifications listed below. Now back to our syllabus. Your lab TA is here to help, and we all want to see you be successful. We can only do so much, and you will need to be an active part of that success. So follow these guidelines, use the resources we have provided, and communicate with your TA along the way. When you enter the room, please turn off your electronics or turn off any sounds. If any of your electronics are out during a test, you will automatically earn a 0 on that test, no questions asked. NAU adheres to a strict, safe working and learning environment policy, and if anyone disrupts that environment or creates an unsafe learning and working environment, that person can be removed from the lab. We take academic dishonesty seriously. Anything along the lines of cheating, plagiarism, or fraud will be investigated, and you may earn a 0 on that assignment, fail the lab, or even be removed from the university. If you have registered with Disability Resources or registered during the semester, please communicate any accommodations or concerns with your TAs so we know how best to help you. Last, we have listed student support programs in case you run into any trouble along the way. Sometimes life happens, and having access to other resources can help us be successful. Some of our lab expectations for you are listed below. When you attend lab in person, please keep only what you need with you at your lab benches and put everything else to the side on the shelf and coat hangers. The lab is small, and the less there is to trip on, the safer the lab will remain. Turn in a hard copy of your review questions. Please do not email them to us as they can get lost in our inboxes. And put everything away in preparation for your test. You will need to use clipboards for the practical stations and keep your answers covered while at your seats. Following the test, you will have a 10 to 15 minute review over the lecture. The TA will be asking you lots of questions and recording your participation, so be sure to watch the screencast before you show up for lab. The review is intended to be a discussion of what you learned in the screencast and an opportunity for you to ask questions. Stay for the entire lab. This lab is already blocked out in your schedule, so use this time wisely and efficiently. Get the most out of being in lab. Now that we have made it through the syllabus, please take out your syllabus contract, read over it, sign it, and be prepared to turn it in during your first lab. If you have any questions, email your TA or write them down now so you don't forget. Best of luck to a great semester. This may be a nice point to take a break, stretch, and get a breath of fresh air, walk around, or whatever you like to do to relax. Then get your notebook set up so you can take notes on Lab 1 Endocrine System.